I see reality breaking down all my fantasies. It would be nice if I at least had one fantasy. That neutrality about to take a terabyte from the American apple pie, better get a slice. It's kinda scary the way that this life is moving on. Marvin's doing backflips inside his grave, what's going on? We have head-on collisions, not seeing another's vision. Maybe that's the reason why some colors fit the description. Lot of relationships need life rafts, sinking ships. I guess you just can't have only one like potato chips. I would love for you to listen with an open heart, but would you really even hear me if it's torn apart? I don't do the things that I used to. I'll be fine even if I lose you, okay? Okay.
Peace and blessings, family. My name is Asarimhotep, and I am with the Martin Delaney Center for Egyptology, as well as the popular YouTube channel Mbongi. I am an Africologist and computer scientist out of Houston, Texas, and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And I have spent the last 20 years researching the connections between ancient Kemet, that is modern Egypt, and modern Bantu-speaking cultures of Central and Southern Africa. Throughout this 20-year journey, I've examined all the relevant literature in numerous languages, collected paleontological as well as archaeological data from across millennia. I have presented hypotheses and abandoned hypotheses, come to conclusions and abandoned conclusions, reviewed arguments for and against known hypotheses, and analyzed frameworks that sought to define and characterize the vast array of African experiences. After over 20 years of asking critical questions of history, of philosophy, religion, and culture, I have finally gotten to the point where I have complete and total faith in the results of our research. I say our research because I am one of among a number of scholars who have either laid the foundations in classical Africology or are continuing to expand and develop more robust research on this connection between ancient Egyptian and Bantu civilizations. After spending so much time behind the computer and in the libraries and in the museums for over 20 years, I believe it is time to go out and to touch the living artifacts and engage with the people involved in the research whose stories we have been telling all this time, which brings us to why we are here today. Although I have written and will continue to write about the results of my research, my goal now is to summarize this data and present it in documentary film form. I have decided to put some of that computer science as well as new media experience together to creatively tell this important aspect of African history that many may not be aware of. The title of the film is China Intu, Ancient Kemet and the Intu Universe, and we are currently raising funds for the first phase of our journey. In February of 2022, I will be joining the crew of the award-winning documentary film Hapi, The Role of Economics on the Development of Civilization, for a very important Returning to the Source tour and conference in Egypt, which we know is in Northeast Africa. And while I am there, I will be shooting parts of our film China Intu and gathering footage for a proof of concept trailer, which will be used for greater fundraising efforts in the near future. And this is where you come in. I am currently trying to raise $5,000 to help with location expenses, equipment rentals, insurance, and the like, so that we can get some great shots for some primary as well as B-roll footage. When we return from Egypt, some of this footage will be combined with some preliminary interviews to compile a unique trailer to give the audience and potential investors a glimpse of the vision and potential of the film. Our ultimate goal is to travel to places like the Democratic Republic of Congo, Zimbabwe, Uganda, and South Africa for the first film. And did I forget to mention that we intend for this to be a series of documentary films? Therefore, subsequent films will require us to travel to places like Cameroon, Nigeria, Ghana, and Senegal, as well as Ethiopia, Kenya, and Somalia. We have big goals, and with your help, we can make this happen. And if you're interested in donating to this film project, please visit our website at www.chinaintufilm.com, where you can leave a donation. There are other ways you can donate as well, which includes joining our Patreon page, donating through CashApp, or donating live when we're doing a live show on YouTube. And the YouTube channel has over 6,000 subscribers, and Facebook has over 5,000 subscribers as well. And with a minimum donation of like $5 each, we can quickly reach our goal. You can spread the word of our efforts by sharing this video with friends and colleagues, as well as liking it. We appreciate your help, and all donors will be given credit on the website, as well as at the end of the film during the credits. We thank you from the bottom of our heart to those who have given generously already, and we look forward to bringing this important film to the public. Hotep. Peace and blessings, family. This is your brother, asarimhotep, with the Madhu Institute for the Advancement of Science and Culture, as well as the Martin Delaney Center for Egyptology. And welcome to the Mbongi. And this is lesson 3 in our series titled Initiation into Kimoyo Cosmogram, explaining of graphic signs. Excuse me. And if you are just joining the series, I encourage you to look on the channel for lessons 1 and 2. Matter of fact, I'll just link them in the description, and so you can get, a background into exactly what we're doing here. And so in lesson 1, we gave a basic run through of the symbol that we created for the concept of Kimoyo, which you see here on the left. And in lesson 2, we went through the concept of initiation itself, and how this symbol represents at least a central Bantu concept of, and an ancient Egyptian concept of following the sun, in terms of a model for initiation. And so in this lesson, I'm going to, reintroduce, or at least go into detail about a second cosmogram, so to speak, that we will be using to represent the concept of Kimoyo and its nuances that isn't necessarily able to be articulated with the symbol that you see on the left. So what I'm going to do is share my screen, and let me just start from the beginning there, and we will get started with today's lesson. And so let me remove that, and we should be good from here. And here we go. So again, this is lesson 3, Initiation into Kimoyo Cosmogram. And so, as you know, that if you saw the video at the beginning of this program, we are currently raising funds for the first phase of the Chiena Intu documentary film, subtitled Ancient Kemet in the Intu Universe. And so one of the ways in which you can support, besides going to the chienaintufilm.com website, is by joining our Patreon page. And so our Patreon members often get first access to certain interviews and lessons and behind the scenes of the upcoming project. So make sure that you visit the webpage. That's patreon.com/asarimhotep. And, consider joining if you have not already. And as always, this is a particular lesson in what I call putting on our African thinking cap. And CAP is an acronym for a creative application of African philosophy. And so this is exactly what we are doing today. It is going back, retrieving the kernels, the essence, the inner logic and framework of certain fundamental African concepts, Pan-African concepts, and reimagining in ways that serve us in the modern times. And so this is exactly what we're doing with the Kimoyo cosmograms here. So there is no particular religion called Kimoyo in Africa. However, following Fukiao's explanation of the essence of what Bantu spiritual or spirituality and religion, I felt that this term, Kimoyo, best described what I have been studying for over 20 years concerning the dominant perspective and inner logic of African spiritual traditions, wisdom traditions. So I came up with these two icons here, these what we're calling them cosmographs, to better represent these fundamental concepts. And so you get these lessons in lesson 1, you get these lessons in lesson 2 as far as uh the icon that you see on the left here. And today we will be discussing this kind of spiral triangle, with, or pyramid, with the 3 dots and the little dotted lines connecting them all here. So there's actually more we can discuss and add, to this particular concept, but I'm gonna try to keep it as brief as possible. And so we may split it up into future lessons, but this will be the fundamental aspects of the iconography that we see here today. So we have defined Kimoyo as the following: the art of adding life to life, the art of vitality and prosperity, of making things to flourish in all areas of life. And the word moyo itself is a word that literally derives from the word for heart, but it has other derived meanings, meaning life, spirit, soul, intelligence, mind, etc., etc. And so key is a word for art or manner of doing something. And so this is, the combine is this kind of vitality or vitalism as Fukiao describes it. And uh, and so I expanded it based upon the underlying nuances of the combined synthesis, or the synthesis of these many African traditions that share the same inner logic. So Kimoyo is equivalent to the inner logic of the dominant model and worldview that spread over the African continent in terms of indigenous wisdom traditions. So this is uh, before the invasions of Christianity and Islam into Africa. So, we talked about initiation and the concept of following the sun. Again, if you want that lesson, click the lesson 2 link in the description, and we'll go through that. But in essence, following the sun is following two things: the wisdom of the elders, the master teachers, who are transmitting the uh, the accumulated knowledge and wisdom of the arts of healing, of running a society, of keeping a stable community and family, etc. You're following their lead. And then in the process, you're feeding and becoming an Nganga yourself, and you become the individual whom future leaders follow in terms of, your character, in terms of your example, and how you move in the society. And so, and then of course, because of the sun's apparent movement around the earth, that becomes the key motto and metaphor for this evolutionary process, the cyclical process of conception, birth, maturity, and death, the life cycle of all uh, animate things and even social things in the universe. And so, here is the phrase Landa and Tangu, following the sun, in Kikongo, Dingo Dingo Dia Landa and Tangu, a process of following the sun in its apparent trajectory. And in ancient Kemet, they simply call it Shimsu Heru, the followers of Horus, and which were a group of metallurgists, disciples who followed the example of Horus, who was, of course, the living sun. Um, and so, again, those lessons are in lesson 2. And so I won't get into deep with that, but this will be key in the last part of our discussion concerning the icon that we're discussing today. And of course, I mentioned Fukiao, and if you're not familiar with who Dr. Kimwadinde Kiabonseki Fukiao is, he was a initiate, an elder scholar out of the Democratic Republic of Congo, of the Bakongo people. He spoke Kikongo, and he's written several books, African Cosmology of the Bantu Congo being one of his most well-known. Of course, his Self-Healing Power and Therapy, and Simba Simbi. Uh, there are other works in English that he has, and there's a number of works that were written in French that, may still be available, like in the Congo or whatnot. I know Dr. Bombaro is translating one into English and is working on that now. But there are also some unpublished works of his in English that I have myself, that the current legal holder is working on getting it published. So some of the concepts in which I will discuss will come from, one or two of those unpublished works of Fukiao. So this is the symbol here, and I'm not sure if I've given it an official name, but for right now, it's Kimoyo Pyramid. Until we figure out a good name for it, that's just what we'll call it. So that's a temporary name for it. But as you can see, it is simply a line that is, so if you remember from the previous lessons, the concept of the Dakinga is often depicted as a circle, but it's also depicted as a spiral. And so the circle is actually a stylized variant of the spiral. And all throughout Africa, the spiral represents a very fundamental concept in terms of the cyclical nature of existence, but the ever expanding cycles, the unwinding of time from a central point. And so we're doing that same concept here, just in a different way. And so, if you've paid attention to any kind of, Bantu iconography, they're heavy on shapes. And so a lot of crosses, a lot of circles, spirals, triangles, the rectangles and squares, all having, esoteric teachings. This is the way that they teach. So the ancient Egyptians were a little bit more elaborate. So they was full out drawing in their hieroglyphs aspects of nature. So full on birds, hippos, the sky, sun, stars, human beings. But the lessons that you find among the people of the the Bantu speakers, they like to do it primarily through shapes. And so, without necessarily having to be a well-rounded artist, you can reduplicate these shapes very easily and teach your young ones. So these are designed to be simple so that you can have conversations about key fundamental aspects of life and evolution. And so this is what this is. So again, we see from a central point here, the spiral starting, and there's 7 lines. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Why 7? 7 is supposed to be this universal uh cosmic number, divine number, and we're just going to keep the party going with that. And so, consisting of the numbers of the addition of 3 and 4, odd being masculine and even being feminine, we're just going to keep that tradition. So, excuse my coughing, a little bit under the weather. So, you may hear that throughout. And so we're just going to keep that line of thought going, and deeming 7 a sacred number. And I'll do a separate video on the 7 concepts that it is going to represent for us Africologists who are uh, dreaming of new ways, putting on our African thinking cap, trying to make African cultural ideas normative in these diasporic spaces, and that they are meaningful and valuable in the lives of African people worldwide. So here we go. And then there will be another lesson on the concept of Kaninga and balance, and using this symbolism here. So y'all be prepared for that. And we'll be discussing the concept of Ma'at from there. And maybe we can adopt these particular concepts in our own traditions here. So, and we'll get into this. It won't be too in depth here, but just keep these concepts in mind. What I argue essentially is that life is about 2 things. It's about sex and communication. And sex being the ritual, the essential attraction, the ritual for producing life. And two life bodies coming together to produce life in terms of the purpose, not just the pleasure, but the is used as a metaphor for the creative process and what that entails. And then of course the concept of communication. And so, ultimately when this whole series is done, we will see better the underlying themes of what we mean here in terms of life. And that is life essentially being about 2 things: sex and communication. And so while I love to draw primarily from the ancient Egyptian and the Bantu speaking people, today we are going to draw from the Dagura people of West Africa. Excuse me. And these concepts in which we're going to discuss exist in other areas of Africa, and including the Bantu speaking people and of course the ancient Egyptian. But I like the way in which Dr. Tangan here, Dr. Alexis Bikyani Tangam, articulates this from within the Dagura tradition. And I think that the way that it is explained here will
will help us to understand if we apply this in similar wisdom traditions across Africa. So going back, the explanation of this symbol will be, connected to the ideas that are articulated in this particular work here, of life and health, the language of in the language of art and religion in an African medical system. And so again, the Dagura people, sometimes called the Dagari, um, exist in, actually, I think they're in three areas. So they're in Burkina Faso, formerly Upper Volta, um, Upper Ghana in northern Ghana, and in places like Mali. And what we got to understand is that these folks here are all related to the Dogon and Mosi people. Like there's a continuum in terms of the Dagara, the Dogon, Mosi individuals. Like that whole strip is just a group of related folks. So if you find similarities, for example, between stuff that you hear amongst the Dagara people and the Dogon, and that's because essentially they're uh they have the same immediate ancestors. So the do no, I'm saying the Dogon, the Dagara people that we're going to be speaking of today, however, is going to be focused on the northern Ghana. Those appear in this area in northern Ghana. And so, if you're familiar with the Dagara, more than likely you have heard of them through now the ancestor, the late Dr. Uh, Malidoma Some. And he originates from the Dagara who lived in Burkina Faso. So a lot of the articulation of the wisdom tradition of the Dagara people that most folks are familiar with comes from the small village in Burkina Faso. However, again, the Dagara people are a large group of people that are spread out. Of course, these are colonial borders and not based upon any kind of ethnic grouping or language grouping or anything to that nature. So uh so again, the Dagara people also live in northern Ghana. So one of the things that Dr. Tangon reminds us in his text is that when we're talking about African concepts, we have to be mindful that not all things translate easily into Western languages. And I wouldn't say so because, it's impossible. It's just that the inner logic of the cultures make it difficult to translate ideas in, from African cultures into Western ones. It's not so much the language, it's more so the culture, the inner logic and frameworks, the lenses in which the interpretation is being had. And so he states here, Horton shows how the above mentioned scholars have used Judeo Christian religious concepts to interpret African thought, and asserts that such notions as God, supreme being, spirit, souls, spirits of the wild, and so on are meaningful only to people who have spent years studying and practicing Judeo Christian religion and who wish to have a translated version of African thought in Western Christianity. This, as Horton points out, is the scope of the work of Mbiti, but also of Mulago and Kagame, not mentioned by Horton. He continues, in other words, metaphysical concepts are usually embedded in such institutions and practices as the personified earth, known as Tang, and or rain, sa, without necessarily conceptualizing them as transcendental supernatural beings. Excuse me. So what he's saying here, he tells us at the beginning that it's going to be hard for you to understand if you're looking at this through a Judeo-Christian religion, because in the Judeo-Christian religious mindset, and you can add Islamic in there, they actually believe that the Africans necessarily believe of their personifications being living conscious entities unto themselves that are like entities like human beings, right? So when they talk about like worshiping Ogun or Olodumare, not Olodumare, but like Oya, or Marimba, the goddess of music, for example, in Southern Africa, that these personifications are in fact transcendental, supernatural, quote unquote, beings. Even the concept of supernatural has no equivalent in an indigenous African wisdom tradition that we can fall that falls under the Kimoyo label. Under Kimoyo, the concept of supernatural being is not a real concept. It doesn't exist. So he mentions here, for example, the personified. He says, in other words, metaphysical concepts are usually embedded in such institutions and practices as the personified earth, Ting, or rain, Sa, without necessarily conceptualizing them as transcendental supernatural beings. And so the tongue, this is equivalent to the ancient Egyptian word ter. Some people say ta, as in like ta Mary. This the same word here, tongue. And the word rain, sa. It's also a homophone of the word sa, meaning father. So the same father, using paronymy, the word for father and the word for rain come together and merge and becomes a principle of creation. And then, of course, the earth is feminine. And, when the father rain, uh, sends his life fluids on the earth, life in these particular domains begin to happen. And so we see a similar idea, even though the genders are reversed, in the ancient Egyptian, imagination. So we see here the earth is called Geb, even though they have another word for earth called Ta or Ting in the Dagura language. And then we have Nut, which is the sky, which is feminine. And then Shu is the god of air or atmosphere, that in between the starry sky that you see out beyond our atmosphere, and then this atmosphere here. And so remember, they didn't get rain a lot, but that empty space is called we call Shu, or Shawa, if you want to say here. So a similar idea, but the point here being is that just because you see anthropomorphic and animal centric representations of ideas, these they're you should not view them as some kind of transcendental living beings that are to be understood like this. This is done for pedagogical purposes, for teaching. It's their way of teaching and transmitting knowledge. Dr. Tengon, and you should notice that word Tingon has the root ting in it, meaning earth. He was also initiated into the Ting, uh, I don't want to say priesthood, but a particular wisdom tradition that they're focused on. That has to deal with, earth sciences and the like. So he continues. According to Dagura myth of origin, nature itself is an autogeneric being and has no creator. So understand this. When we talk about the concept of God, God never has a creator. He's telling you in so many ways here that it is an autogeneric being, talking about nature, and has no creator. That means nature is God. And, if we translate into English, God is nature. It consists of two extending spatial domains, namely the space above, Sa-zu-zu meaning space, and the space below, Ting-zu. The space above in human language is figuratively and metaphorically described as an undivided single extending entity and is perceived to be one common house, space, society of beings and elements. In contrast with the space above, the space below, consisting of the Earth and its atmospheric surroundings, is further segmented into six prototypical domains that are broken into fragments and located randomly to cover the whole of the Earth space. So nature itself is divided into two domains: the space or outer space domain, and then the Earth domain. And so the outer space domain is just one infinite, continuous, entity consisting of anything, that's not on Earth. And so essentially, this is what he's saying, that the universe in their world consists of two domains: what's on Earth and then what is not on Earth. So what is not on Earth is called Sa-zu, and what is on Earth is Ting-zu. Those are the two domains. So this becomes very important to, the concepts that we discussed in lesson 1 concerning the fundamentals of what Kimoyo is. And we have to always articulate this and understand this, so you just don't lump all African religions together, and understanding that this is the basis of Kimoyo. And so he continues, this mythical structure of the cosmic realm appears as the main social cultural syntax for understanding Dagura society and culture. So their society is organized based on their understanding of cosmos. In the first place, the society is a house-based social structure supported by a mythical ideology of kinship relations. So we understand that nature is God, and that God is an autogeneric entity, creator that has no creator itself, right? And so we go now to the Amazulu tradition, and just for some supporters, just showing that this goes as far down in South Africa in terms of this concept. And in the text, by the late Jordan Ngubani, titled Conflict of Minds. And so there's a chapter where he's describing the Amazulu wisdom tradition and their conceptualization of what we would call God in English. And so he says, the Zulus coupled the ancient aphorism Umuntu Ngumuntu with Umuntu Akalawa. The person is never so evil, he is beyond redemption. The Zulu speaking nomarchies of antiquity believed that all things had their origin in Ukobo. Everything in the cosmic order evolved from Ukobo. This Ukobo was primordial consciousness. It had no beginning and no end. It was the infinite total of the values of all things, which together made the cosmic order. In other words, everything that's on earth and not on earth. It is an infinite existence, an infinite being. It is Ukobo is a word for reality in the Zulu language, in isiZulu, as we would say. He continues, Ukobo was forever forming clusters of itself and combining these to produce phenomena. The aggregation, or the grouping, the clustering, to be exact, was regulated by Mthetho Wemvelo, the law of appearing. Since Ukobo, the consciousness was alive and there was no death in it, since it was an infinity. Human behavior in all its forms, on every plane and in all situations, translated the law into action. Nothing on earth or in the cosmic order could violate the law, for the violation was itself an expression of the law. So again, he's letting you know that Ukobo is an infinity. It exists forever, but it has no beginning. It is the infinity, but it consists of everything and all things at once, but it's always forever evolving and creating various discrete versions of itself. And so whether we are in the Congo, whether we're in ancient Kemet, whether we are in the Dagura on the Dagura or the Dogon in Mali, the idea is the same. When it comes to this concept of what we call God, it is existence itself. And so this becomes very important because of the fundamental consciousness in life that is spread and permeates throughout this infinity. And so I interviewed Dr. Tangon, and you can find it on my YouTube channel. It says here, in our conversation, he says the following. And so at 18 minutes and 40 seconds of our conversation, Dr. Tangon states that Dagura religion is all about the cosmos, the cosmic force, the cosmic energy. Cosmos equals everything that is together, what is on earth and what is not on earth. You need to know and interact with this cosmos. Whatever you do practically to get to know the cosmos, to get to know God, you do it in the form of deity, the form of God, the form of divinity. You give it a personality using one of the forces. So he's telling you, how the indigenous wisdom tradition teaches, which is why it's silly, for example, when you have these Christians and Muslims trying to come into Africa and tell Africans that they are worshiping um, other gods and other entities and not understanding anything about Africa whatsoever. So when you see, going back, these personifications, these are mathematical equations, these are symbols, formulas, ideas, ways to convey and teach wisdom about nature. Because when you study nature, you're studying God. So now we continue. On the contrary, all things and beings have the spirit of life and are therefore animate and spiritual. All things and beings share a common life spirit that is continuously circulating between bodies, objects, and beings. I'm going to repeat that again. On the contrary, all things and beings have the spirit of life, of moyo, and are therefore animate and spiritual. All things and beings share a common life spirit. Why? Because Ukobo, everything in the cosmic order evolved from Ukobo. This Ukobo was primordial consciousness. It had no beginning and no end. It was an infinite total of the values of all things which together made the cosmic order. Skipping down, since Ukobo, the consciousness was alive and there was no death in it, since it was an infinity, human behavior in all its forms in every plane in all situations translated the law into action. Ukobo evolves and it sends the life spirit into all discrete things. And so it circulates between the bodies. Any kind of object has this spark of the infinite, if we want to just say that. And so religion, art, and healing are linked in diverse ways to ensure the proper transference of life spirits from their sources, namely the earth and the sky, rain via death to animate different bodies of beings. So they're talking about the cycle of life here. So let me read that a little bit more slowly. Religion, art, and healing are linked in diverse ways to ensure the proper transference of life spirits from their sources, namely the earth and the sky or rain via death to animate different bodies and beings. So when one entity dies or dissipates, that that spirit which animates it transfers to another body. So we see this happen in our lives. So when human beings die, all the entities that make up our body, all the cells and all that gets transformed back into earth material because that's where we were animated from. And it goes back to the earth, nurtures the earth. And when the spirit of life comes to evolve and become another entity, it draws upon those elements that make up that particular body. And so life is about this transference of this life spirit of moyo. And so the word that is used by um Ngubani is the word agmanation. So he's saying the agmanation, the Ukoba was forever forming clusters of itself and combining these to produce phenomena. So all phenomena are just clusters of this infinite Ukobo, of this infinite reality, this infinite God. And when these elements come together and form a discrete object, circulating inside of that cluster is the spirit. In a Dogon tradition, they call it the wind or the whirlwind. It's a spinning whirlwind. It's life. I should have added that into the dang. Now that I'm thinking about it, see, got me putting out this stuff and I'm forgetting stuff. Anyway, um, it's a whirlwind. And so if you can just imagine, like a tornado of 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 matter, and then inside the tornado, of course, is spinning. It's the life spirit, the spark. Excuse me. So it's this transference of life spirits from their sources, namely the earth and the sky, rain via death to animate different bodies and beings. In order for this to happen, the two main life forces and life sources, the earth and rain, and remember the rain is just symbolic of the sky above. So what's not on earth and what's on earth are perceived as the two ancestral uh, progenitors of all life, and together occupy the global universe, which is divided into two homesteads. As life progenitors, they are also the first ancestors and remain the principal focus during ancestor worship. So when we are revering our ancestors, ultimately we're going down a line into the two main uh progenitors, life forces that came together to produce us. So earth and sky. And so it is, remember, the earth and sky is just the totality, is just God. So we worship the divine through our ancestors because ultimately God is our ancestor. And so we divide the concept of God into two genders. the male sky and the female earth. Generally, ancient Egypt, they didn't do that. They reversed the genders, but fundamentally it's the same thing. The infinite sky and the finite earth that came together and produced, we are the children. And as what's his name would always say, we are both the children of the earth and the stars. And I'm talking about Dr. Kipkowicz, not Dr. Kipkowicz Sambu. Dang, what is his name? I can't even remember right off the bat. I just had him in my head, but in his text, um, he describes that relationship in that way. That human beings, for example, being children of the earth and children of the stars, and this is essentially what he is saying. And I'm gonna remember his name just randomly before, and I'm gonna definitely add him, into that mix, because I might do a part two, just a smaller one, just on this concept alone, which I think is good. And so we continue. Life's cosmological origins and the ancestors. And so this is coming from, page 45. So these are direct quotes. So life origins of Dr. Tangon's book of Life and Health. So life origins, its transmission and sustenance within different bodies and beings are basically the foundations of any medical system. And so that's going to be important because, as we've discussed previously, for most of African wisdom traditions, besides ethics, spiritual traditions, for the most part, concentrated on healing, health. And so a lot of what you're seeing in these wisdom traditions are associated with the art of healing. And so, but I highlighted these three concepts here in terms of life origins, its transmission and sustenance, because these are going to represent those three corners and processes that you saw in the Kimoyo Cosmogram, the second one. And so, as already stated in chapter 1, the space below consists of the earth space as the protogenitrix mother figure that is further segmented into 6 prototypical domains that are further fragmented and located randomly to cover the whole of the land and atmospheric space of the earth. These include the arboreal plant space, the hill space, the rock space, the atmospheric space of the wind, the sea water space, and the atmospheric space of fire. Life, the concept of life, is derived from the creative energies of all those agents acting together as engaged parents with all living things and beings as their offspring. So those clusters coming together, combined with motion, electromagnetism, these forces come together, the principle of life emerges. And it is done through these stages of birth, transmission, sustenance, and then death. And so continues on the next page. Life processes, especially regarding transmission, sustenance, and maintenance, can only and effectively take place if there is a proper understanding and the use of this language, which, for want of a better word, I will refer to as the proto language of life. And I'm going to do a separate presentation on the proto language of life and its relationship to the as a way to better explain the concept of meta nature in the ancient Egyptian tradition. So, the process of healthcare, in particular, as I will demonstrate later on, involves 3 dimensions, including the proper transmission of life from one source to another, the proper sustenance of this life within the second source to ensure its full growth and viability within a lifespan. And lastly, the proper passing of life to its original source, where it will be recycled. So, as I mentioned before, just using human beings as an example, when somehow this whirlwind of the life force spins and creates this human body that grows, develops, it fights entropy, and then the life force leaves for whatever reason, and the elements unwind and fall back into the earth, and then those elements are recycled again to create some other type of life form. So it's a transmission process. It's a recycling, because remember, the earth is a closed system. The universe is a closed system. And so we can only, you know, stuff that's just appear out of nowhere. We recycle the matter that is around us. And so this is what essentially I'm trying to articulate here. So hopefully when you see this symbol, you see exactly what we're talking about here. So this is representative of this concept of the original life matter going through these three processes here. And remember, it's a transference of life from one entity to another. So we're going back here. On the contrary, all things and beings have the spirit of life and are therefore animate and spiritual. All things and beings share a common life spirit that is continuously circulating between bodies, objects, and beings. So that's what these living, we do the circles, meaning the living sun. So these living suns representing phenomena, objects, beings. So the life force is traveling between these objects, these stages of life. And so there's the transmission, the sustenance and maintenance. And then, as you get older and mature, the passing of that life energy going back to its source, getting ready to be recycled. And even when you see our modern recycle symbol, you see it's just an arrow and a triangle. And so this is essentially what we're talking about here. The recycling of that life spirit of Moyo. So this is the Kimoyo symbol, just a little bit more nuanced. And so I'm trying to find a good and fly African word that is equivalent to the concept of recycling, of renewal, and that's probably what I will call this symbol. I'm looking into Yoruba. Yoruba has a good candidate, but I'm looking at some other languages as well. So if you understand, and if you don't have the book, I recommend that you get the book of Life and Health, the Language and Art of Religion in an African Medical System by Dr. Tangong. But essentially that's what is meant by this symbol. So if this gives us an opportunity to teach so much just about the universe itself, about our place in the universe, about, you can teach discrete mathematics with this, computer science, talk about the cycles of life, biomimicry. There's so much that you can do just having an understanding of this symbol as your foundation. And so, I would learn this symbol, practice drawing it. Remember, it's 7 lines in a pyramid spiral. And this is what we mean when we see this symbol. And so we go back now to Fukuyama in his PhD dissertation, And he states, he articulates what Kimoyo is. And so he says, as a matter of fact, the whole African religion, as one can see in their aspect among the Bantu people, have two key words besides Nzambi or Kalunga, both titles representing the infinite God force among the Bantu speaking people of the Democratic Republic of Congo. These words are Ngolo and Moyo, force, energy or dynamism, and life, vitality, respectively. It is here that the African religions and their aspect among the Bantu find the roots of their dynamism in their wholeness. They labeled these people animist and their religion animism. The word itself related to anima or animal says clearly that what these scholars had in mind about African religion in general and about its aspects among the Bantu people in particular. The Bantu religion is not animism or animalism. Neither are the Bantu animist or animalist. And I actually disagree with him here because, Dr. Fukuyama wasn't a historical comparative linguist. And so he wasn't necessarily concerned with the origins of words and how they're used even in Indo-European languages. And so the word, ani, from which the word animalism and all that comes from, is simply a word for life. And so it's animated in terms of the concept. So he's making an argument here that's really not an argument because all he did was replace a one word meaning he's replaced one word with another word that means the same thing. So if you say moyo or you say animate, then you're talking about the same thing. You're talking about adding life, the presence of life, the presence of movement, of vitality. They're all the same thing. So on this, I'm going to have to disagree with Elder Fukuyama on linguistic grounds. The Bantu people are vitalist. This is accepting themselves as well as everything in the universe as part of Nkingu e Moyo, the principle of life in its wholeness. Their religion deals principally with force and vitality. A religion that does not believe in any physical being, but in Ngolo e Moyo Mudingo Dingo, force and life through Dingo Dingo, the natural way of life and change. This religion can be called dynamo vitalism, aka Kimoyo. And so when we talk about Kimoyo, it's the art and the study of God, the principle of life and vitality. This is what God is. It is the spirit of life itself, the infinite of it all. And so when we're studying the totality, the infinite of God through the micro objects that we can access. So by studying the smaller, we get a better understanding of the infinite. And so this is what Kimoyo is. And so it's not understanding that God itself is force and vitality. It is Ngolo, energy, power, dynamism. Ngolo ye moyo. Ngolo, power, dynamism, and life of Dingo Dingo. It's a process through motion and change. And so you'll see Moyo or Kimoyo, Mudingo Dingo, or Musabo, Kepper. And we'll get into that in another lesson as well. There's so much. I could really teach a course on this, which I plan on, articulating in the future, maybe at a university or something. I could put together a curriculum. But, understanding this will help you to understand the nature of these African wisdom traditions, because they're not articulating the concept of God in the same way that you find in Judeo-Christian religion. and in Islam. It's a totally different beast. It's more akin to science. The way that scientists look at the universe is the way that Africans, the the peoples of the wisdom traditions look at it. Now you have lower aspects in just the culture where people don't get the deeper aspects of certain things, but we'll get into why that is the case in the second part of this discussion. And so when we talk about this concept of kimoyo and being, you know uh, I like to cite this author a lot, Mugobe Ramose, on Ubuntu, and he's written several articles in this book here, the African Philosophy Reader, the second edition, and he states concerning the concept of being and existing. African philosophy is consistent with the philosophic position that motion is the principle of being. According to this understanding, the condition of being with regard to every entity means that to be is to be in the condition of ness. Whatever is perceived as a whole is always a wholeness in the sense that it exists and persists towards that which is yet to be. So we're talking about evolution here. This is why we use this symbol here. It's an unwinding, it's a forever evolving of the life spirit into various different discrete objects and phenomena, unwinding itself, going back to the source and coming together to be something else. It's always a perpetual coming and going into being, because this is the characteristic of every existing entity. Being is to be understood always as a wholeness. Excuse me. Going back to Fukuyama, the Bantu people are vitalists. This is accepting themselves as well as everything in the universe as part of Nkingo Moyo, the principle of life in its wholeness. That's why it's important to read African scholars. Epistemologically, being is conceived as a perpetual and universal movement of sharing and exchange of the forces of life. The African philosophic conception of the universe is, to borrow from the Greek pantheistic, on this view, order cannot be established and fixed for all time. So when we go back to our symbol here, and even the one that we did in lessons 1 and 2, you always see that, even though this is a 2D static image, the underlying implication is that it is motion and it is ever evolving, and that it is the same life principle that is manifesting itself as different entities that we call objects or phenomena in the universe. And so that life entity among the collagen of Kenya, they call Maat. And it is symbolized as what they call a burning relay torch. And so in his 2008 text on is Isis Asis, and he's first articulating the relationship between the collagen people and the ancient Egyptians and their origins in ancient Egypt. And so he says here, and this is from a previous conversation, so I only highlighted what's in yellow. That's what I want us to focus on. He says that Mat is conceived of as a kind of philosophical burning relay torch, embodying the best in a patriarchal lineage called Mat, as relates to the observance of the moral code, rules, rights, and obligations to one another, living or dead, within the lineage that must be passed forth to the following generation to keep it burning. It is born by the immortal spirit in the human body, the essence of life itself. So let's go back. So the essence of life itself, the mat, is what is being generated and passed and going through the stages of transmission, sustenance, or sustenance and maintenance, and then passing, and then being recycled and doing it again. And so when the life spirit, in terms of the human phenomena, for them it is patrilineal. It comes through the line of the Father. Why? Because the Father is symbolic of the sky. And it is from the seminal fluid of rain that impregnates the Mother Earth that gives birth to the children in these, for the Dagura people, in these 6 important domains that were mentioned earlier. But for the collagen, it's called Mat, and it also comes with, excuse me, it also comes with a set of moral codes and ethic codes that are transmitted, through the lineage, along with the life force, the immortal life force, because it's the same life force. It is the God force. It's the God spark. It is also like if y'all familiar with the Transformers, comic book, cartoon, and the movie series. In the Transformers, they had this entity called the Allspark, which contained the infinite creative life spark or energy that animated various different things. This is what was responsible for the origin of the Transformers themselves. And so it's in a similar fashion, it's like that with us. And so there's this Allspark that the ancient Egyptians and the collagen called Mat, that the Amazulu and the Bakongo and the Baluba called Moyo, that the Akan called Mogia, that life spirit, that nature, that creative essence, the Ba, the Ka, whatever you want to call it, is what is animating individuals. And so, more on the collagen from Sambu. He says, actually, he's citing Ian Orchardson on the importance of reincarnation among the collagen. He says most of these ceremonies are directly or indirectly connected with the belief in the reality and continuity of the human spirit, a belief which runs like a thread throughout their lives. They believe that every human spirit has existed from far back in the past, because remember that immortal spirit that comes directly from the infinite creative source, that it is continually reincarnated so long as the family persists. Hence the extreme importance of marriage, of carrying on the line of descent, and of all that pertains to the continuity of the family. So they put this within this logic of Kimoyo into a family context, and how the family has its own Kimoyo, or his own Moyo spirit that is perpetually remanifesting itself as members of descendants of the primordial line. And so, going back to the Dagura people, Dr. Tengan says, from this perspective, life sustenance and healing is not just about the human body and life form, but about all bodies and life forms. Sustenance and healing become a process of placing all bodies and life forms in resonance with each other within their ecological environment. Indeed, all healing cults, shrines, and institutions form part of this perspective. So remember that life we articulating it today in terms of a spin, a spiral, a constant movement of force. We can call it, atoms, electrical, and we'll get into the importance of electricity in terms of the body at some later date, God willing. So this notion here that this is the same procedure for all beings and entities is not just human, but in order to have a healthy self, all of these entities must be vibrating at the same resonance. They must resonate with each other. They must be vibrating. Anything that is off kilter brings about sickness and despair. This is why ma'at, balance, harmony, was so essential to ancient Egyptian society, because it permeated beyond simply truth, justice, order. It dealt with health. And if you have Aluja Volume 2, you know how Ma'at, because I'm dealing with the etymology of Ma'at in the second chapter, how that is manifested itself in the Congo and amongst the Amazulu people dealing with health. And so that's why in a subsequent lecture, I'm going to be using our second symbol and attach it to, what I would be calling the Kaninga, and dealing with that balance. It's the cognate for Ma'at, and to show how health and healing is articulated by this symbol. So remember, we're coming up with these symbols and these ideas to better articulate these commonalities and differences within African wisdom traditions, and to give it some kind of mathematical formulae or whatnot, so we can better teach and articulate what our ancestors have been revealing to us, all this time. And so this concept of resonance is something that I talked about in Aluja Volume 1 way back in 2013. And so I articulated the concept of it's called spiritual resonance. And so remember, Tangon's text came out in 2019. So some 6 years later or so, 6 or 7 years later, he's articulating the kind of the same thing that I'm doing, just been it in a different way. So in the text, and I'm talking about Allah. This is, my first, argument against Dr. Wesley Muhammad on the etymology of Allah. But within that discussion in chapter 2, I say this is the basis of all spiritual systems. I have coined the phrase spiritual resonance to describe this phenomenon in human religious systems. By understanding the basics of the science of resonance, one is able to understand the inner logic of ancient rituals and iconic associations such as the Black Bull of the Nile Valley in Arabia. A living example will make this clear for us. I continue, this is the essence of resonance in a spiritual context. In physics, resonance is the tendency of a system to oscillate at a greater amplitude at some frequencies than at others. These are known as the system's resonance frequencies. Resonance occurs when a system is able to store and easily transfer energy between two or more different storage modes, such as kinetic energy and potential energy in the case of a pendulum. However, there are some losses from cycle to cycle called damping. Our cell phones and our car radios exist because of resonance. Meaning, for example, like there's a radio station in Houston called 97.9 The Box. So if I want to listen and be in tune with what's going on at the radio station at 97.9, I have to tune my antenna to the frequency of 97.9. Once my car radio or whatever is in resonance at 97.9, now I vibrate and am at the same frequency, and I can get the information from that's being transmitted on that frequency. And so when we're dealing with health and things of this nature, it's the same thing. Like everything has to be vibrating at a certain resonance and in harmony with each other, so that that life entity can circulate, and we can operate at our most optimum, so we can fulfill our life's purpose, with little resistance in that case. And so it's a lot deeper than, just worshiping some gods and putting some food out in a corner for ancestors. It's a whole scientific understanding and logic, and it can be expanded into, understanding even how we do science today, and to give our young people a foundation so that they can go into the sciences having this particular understanding of the universe and how it works, and can possibly expand our understanding of Kimoyo by having a scientific understanding of the universe itself. And so, as I stated before, Kimoyo is used as a pedagogy. And even when it comes to the transmission of information, excuse me, Kimoyo in the symbol becomes very important. So, in one of those unreleased texts that I mentioned before, uh, Bulwal Meso is one of the texts. Is from 1991, but it hasn't been published. And he, gives some kind of graphic designs, which, Dr. Fukuyama is just good at. And in terms of articulating these fundamental ideas from the Congo people. And he talks about this TTT principle. And so the TTT stands for the Kikongo words Tambula, Teza, and Tambakisa, which means to receive, retain, and release. So again, we're given a three principle thing here. So he says, because of the second three T's principle, or 3R principle, as it is known in certain milieu, a true Nganga, which means a specialist or a master or a healer, knows how and when the highest and most powerful knowledge should be received so that it can be accumulated within man's community. In other words, he knows how to receive it, how to retain it, test it, use it, and how to release it. The DNM principle, Dia Nguba, Ye Inkwa Memo, literally eat goober, that is peanuts, with someone who has teeth. That means to share powerful knowledge only with awakened, learned minds. That phrase, Bulwa Meso, means those with open eyes. This is to open, or the word open, and the word eyes. So you only share the knowledge with those who are willing to learn, those who have learned minds. You don't waste your time trying to teach ignorant people, people who don't want to learn, people who don't want to humble themselves. And so, they they articulate it as trying to feed someone with no teeth, peanuts, which is a solid nut, which of course you would need teeth to grind it. So if they don't even have the equipment, metaphorically speaking, if you don't have the intellectual capacity to grind and digest this information should not be shared with you, which is why character is very important in this initiation process, this following of the sun, this Landa and Tangu. Because of this DNM principle, a true Nganga is very modest. First, because he knows the immensity of knowledge that he lacks. And second, because he knows the power of that small amount of true knowledge that he possesses. And so we use the Kimoyo symbol also to represent the TTT principle as articulated by Fukuyama. So it describes the process of receiving tambula, retaining teza, and releasing tambakisa, the wisdom, and knowing when to do so. So, these symbols, that's why we taught in levels. I mean, all education systems teach in levels. But the way that we do it is that we do those personifications. We draw those those entities. We carve those gods and goddesses. But once you get it to a certain level of understanding, then we can fall back and just start using lines, squares, etc., etc. Because these are principles that we're teaching, fundamental aspects and laws of life. But some people you just can't give them, you know, quantum physics equations. You throw Schrodinger's equations at somebody who hasn't taken algebra yet, and they're going to be looking at you funny and confused. So in the ancient Egyptians, you're seeing Geb and Tefnut, or you in the Yoruba tradition, you hear about Ogun, Oya, and all of these are just personifications, principles of universal phenomena. And for the beginners, you got to give them basics. You got to put it into a form that they understand. So since we're so humanocentric, we got to give stuff genders, masculine, feminine, stuff that, doesn't exist necessarily in nature, depending upon the phenomena. The father of this, the son of this, the sister. We have to use language like this to teach young people and young-minded people, people who haven't had time to sit with the information and to learn these deeper aspects. And so there's going to be levels to this, but we can use the same symbols to teach at all levels. So that's why you just don't see them get rid of the iconography in ancient Kemet, because they all can be used to teach the greater and deeper aspects of reality. And so, given all that we said today, I've had to add on to our definition of what is Kimoyo. And so, Kimoyo is not only the art of adding life to life, in terms of the art of vitality and prosperity, of making things to flourish in all areas of life, but it also conveys the healing power of giving, the healing art of open hearted sharing, because it's the exchange of the life forces, as Mugabe Ramose in the African Reader on Ubuntu was discussing earlier that we cited. The exchange, the sharing of life forces that brings about life. That's what we mean by the art of adding life to life. When we share life forces, we share things that promote life with each other, we invigorate and empower, and we add value to one another. And so, Kimoyo, again, is the art of being able to add value, the art of empowering one another. But not only human beings, but the environment, the society as a whole, other animal life, because we all have to share this space. And so this is at the heart of Kimoyo. And this ends my presentation. And of course, you can get Kimoyo gear and other types of designs in terms of t-shirts from spreadshirt.com, /shop/user/imhotep06. And, one of many ways in which you can support this movement or whatnot. And so with that said, I do appreciate your time. And if you have any questions, you know, holla at me when you can, and I will stop sharing the screen. So, part 4 will be coming up soon. And so we'll be talking about the dingo dingo process and that aspect of Kimoyo. So as you can see, we are building up our lessons so that we can get a holistic understanding of this particular concept. So with that said, I say God bless y'all. Y'all enjoy the rest of your week. Stay safe, and I will see you next time. Hotep.